Matt says, I've been on BA being elite train for a while, and BA is Brock's security blanket. Keep them together. Well, great segue, because now we're going to talk about Brandon Aiyuk. And I think there's multiple ways that we can have this conversation, Ryan. You know, we can talk about, first of all, let's give him credit. He's had a fantastic season, over 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. When you look at his target rate, how often he's targeted compared to some of these top players in the league, I mean, based off of his numbers, if you just gave him the same targets and everything else stayed the same as far as catch percentage and everything, he'd be by far and away leading everybody in the NFL, and he would be the league MVP. He'd have like over 2,000 yards, and it would be absolutely insane. But that's not the way that it works. Either way, Brandon Aiyuk, in a year when it's time to get paid, has come through, and he's improved every single season. It's phenomenal to watch him play. The question is, I think that we all agree that we want to keep Aiyuk on this team, but the real question is, does he, and are you comfortable with paying him top 5 receiver money? I mean, that's what it's going to be. You're going to have Debo, who's making that money, and then you're asking to pay Aiyuk that same kind of money. Do you think that the 49ers should do it without hesitation? How do you foresee this playing out? Like, what do you think about the Brandon Aiyuk pending contract situation this offseason?
Well, you brought it up, right? If he was targeted as much as the rest of these receivers, he'd be the number one receiver in the NFL. I mean, he is 6th in total yards, but only 34th in targets. So he's 6th in total yards, but only 34th in targets. He has the greatest yards separation in the NFL, most yards per reception in the NFL. He's had a career year as far as yards are concerned. He is definitely a top 5 receiver to me in the NFL, and he should be paid like one as well. And the 49ers absolutely should sign Brandon Aiyuk. And here's the reason. Brandon Aiyuk is exactly what you want from a football player. He is a leader by example. Everything he does outside of the season, outside of the locker room, in the locker room, on the practice field, it's exactly what you want as a coach. He reminds me of Bosa in that regard, because when Bosa is gone during the offseason, you know he's putting in that work and he's going to come back and be in phenomenal shape. It's the same thing with Brandon Aiyuk. You know that he's out there putting in the work and he's going to come back and be in phenomenal shape. And I think Brandon Aiyuk knows what's coming his way. I've been watching a lot of press conferences from Brandon Aiyuk throughout his career. And this last one that I saw from Brandon Aiyuk seemed like a more mature, accomplished Brandon Aiyuk, who knows that he just went out and did exactly what he needed to do to secure his family's future for generations. And he's absolutely going to get paid. Now, what do I think is going to happen? I think the Niners are going to do what they did with Nick Bosa and drag this thing out to the last second and try to get him for as cheap as possible. But that ultimately will end up with him, is what I imagine is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't see a scenario where he's not on the team this upcoming season. Even if they decide to franchise tag him, it's just not going to happen. So he will be on this team. In fact, I think next year he's in the 5th year. So he's going to be on the team no matter what. Under that contract, it's when you sign him this offseason, you're paying him for future years. So BA is going to be a 49er. The question is how long can you really pay him and Debo congruently? How long can that happen? Next year, it's going to be fine. Maybe the year after that, it actually might be fine too, because we'll see how long Trent Williams here, Eric Armstead, George Kittle, CMC even. I think in 2 years, there's a chance that all these guys are not on the roster and the money is freed up and it's fine, even though you're likely going to be paying Purdy at that time as well. I could see a scenario where it's actually able to work, but it's going to be a year-to-year thing, and we're going to see. I think Nicotina brings up a really interesting point here, and I want to talk about this because I feel like there's, and this is not you, Nicotina. I think this is just the overall concept of the way that the 49ers view the situation with Deebo Samuel. He says, but without Deebo, the Niners offense completely struggled. Kind of. Here's what I want to say. Last year, they went without Deebo for a few games, and the offense didn't miss a beat. This year, they went without Deebo and Trent Williams. Right? That's a key kicker in there. There was no Deebo, but there was also no Trent Williams when the offense completely struggled. So was that a Debo thing? When we look at last year without Debo, the offense kept it humming. When we look this year, it was Debo and Trent. I'm not trying to make the case that Debo is not important to this team because he absolutely is. But to say that this offense struggled just because Debo was out, I feel like we're forgetting that Trent Williams was also not in, and that's a pretty big miss.
Trent Williams is more important to this team than Debo, and so I would go with Trent. And shout out to Nicotina. I wonder if is it Andre Nicotina, the rapper? Man, nice.
Could be. Yeah,
Maybe,
could be.
maybe I know that's where you get your name from, right there. Either way, but yeah, no, I think it's a Trent thing more than anything.
Yeah. And listen, he's a hell of an impactful player. And when Debo's going, I don't know that there's many weapons in the league that are on the level of Debo Samuel. I completely acknowledge that. I've seen this a lot from people where they're like, well, but Debo, I mean, when we missed Aiyuk for the one game, we were fine. It's like, well, yeah, take Aiyuk and Trent out and see how things go. I'd be curious to see how that worked out. You know what I mean? Those are two very, very different things. So
And Jenke makes a good point, and I agree with it. It's a Debo without CMC is crucial. Since they got CMC, he's still
for sure.
amazing, still fantastic,
Yes.
still one of the best
Yes.
weapons in the NFL, but not as crucial as he is when CMC is not here.
Yeah. Yeah. Most certainly. Most certainly. So I agree. I think that's that. I mean, it's Trent. It's definitely Trent as well. All these players are important. They're all very good. I mean, we just had a season where Brock Purdy threw for well over 4,000 yards in 16 games in his second year. Fantastic. You've got Debo over 1,000 total yards. You've got BA over 1,000 total yards. You've got Kittle over 1,000 total yards. You've got CMC over 2,000 total yards. And you still have the best left tackle in the game and a hell of a play caller. Everybody deserves credit. This team is phenomenal. I think if you take any one of them out, you're not going to feel great about it. We can argue about who's the most important and who was the MVP and all those things. But I bet you all of them look at each other and say, you're just as important and just as great to this team as I am. They wouldn't look at any of them as more important or less than important. I think they all played a huge part into what this team has been this year and what this offense has been this year, for sure.
Absolutely.
Matt says BA is Brock's. Yep. Okay. Got that one. Just forgot to move past it. That's what started the conversation. Calvin says, Happy New Year, Jesse and Ryan. Happy New Year's. One game at a time. Thanks for the great contents. Appreciate you, Calvin. Matt says, let's clear this up. The false narrative. BA only has 2 drops. People think he has the dropsies. Yeah, it is interesting. I will say that he's had, I don't know what he's been over the last few years, but I feel like there was a couple seasons there maybe where his drops were a little bit higher.
Yeah.
If you're saying it's only 2 drops, that's I don't know the exact number, but that sounds about right. A lot of people looked at some of these games and just like, oh, he had 3 drops at the Cleveland game. He had 3 drops in the Cleveland game. No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
If it touches your hand, it's a drop. That's not how it
that's
works.
not the way it works. If you're running, and I made the argument then, and I'll make it now, it's not ever going to count as a drop when you're running full speed in one direction. And as you're running full speed in that direction, the ball is placed on your back shoulder and you've got to reach and try to make an acrobatic grab just because it touched your hands. That is not a drop. Now, if the argument is, hey, I think BA, if he's an elite receiver, should make those catches, okay, well, let's have that conversation. That's fine. But it's not a drop. And there's no argument there. That is not how drops are calculated. So
I want to get your take on this. Since we're on the subject of BA, I want to get your opinion. It's something I tweeted out yesterday. And I got Stats and Steph's Chances coming on my show after this. I'm going to ask them the same question because I got some pushback. Do you think Brandon Aiyuk, I said Brandon Aiyuk is the best 49ers receiver since Terrell Owens? You know, and people brought up Debo. They brought up Anquan Bolden. They brought up Randy Moss. But I think Anquan Bolden was a little beyond his prime at the point. He's a little slow, amazing hands, tough as hell. And so no disrespect to him. Randy Moss
Anquan Bolden's one of my favorite players of all time.
Love him. And Moss was way past his prime. Debo's not a pure receiver. So that's how I eliminate all these guys. Brandon Lloyd's super talented, but he never put it together like BA. So to me, it's
Mhm.
BA. I want to get your take on that.
Oh, I think it's BA as well. I don't think that there's really a lot of the only argument really could be Debo. If you want to argue Debo, let's have the conversation. And then I would argue weapon versus pure receiver. I guess it's how you look at it. If you're just saying they're the same position, I think we can have a real conversation there. But when you look at Randy Moss, I mean, Randy Moss, of course, Randy Moss is a better player than Brandon Aiyuk. But when he was in a Niners uniform, it was he was way past his
He was a
prime.
shell of himself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only other person that you can actually say that is not Debo Samuel is probably Michael Crabtree. That is the other person you can have the conversation with. And at this point, maybe when you look at his whole time with the 49ers versus Aiyuk's, you can have the conversation. I think Aiyuk is better than Crabtree personally, but that's the other player that I can say, all right, maybe you can have that conversation. But yeah, I think it's Aiyuk. I would go with Aiyuk personally. I would.
Yeah, that's my opinion
And
as well.
it's not, to your point, it's not just the receiving, it's everything else. Every single game, if there's a big play, you can bet your butt that Brandon Aiyuk is down there in the highlight blocking. I mean, how important is that
Yeah.
to the team? How important is that stuff? I mean, do these big plays happen if you don't have a receiver like Aiyuk that is that willing to get dirty and block as if he's the fifth receiver trying to make this team? No.
Right.
Those things are big. Those things are very, very big. And so, yeah, I think that it's
Yeah.
I think you can't overlook those things when you're talking about the overall totality of what Brandon Aiyuk is. So
Yeah. He leaves nothing to be desired, honestly. He's really effective in every way and does the right things on every play, man. And I didn't mean to rhyme, but what can I say?
I just may go down
I
by
just
the bay.